An annual meeting will there's Lisa Soland. Our annual meeting, not only do we recap what's happened over the year and what we hope to happen in the coming year, but it's a good chance for everybody. If it's live, we do this in a theater. If it's on Zoom, we'll do it on Zoom. But everybody introduces themselves and talks about themselves for a minute or two. So we have like about 270 members. 270 members do not show up at the annual meeting, but of the 35 to 50 that do, they all get to say something about themselves for a minute, and we can connect and feel like we really are an organization, which is one of the positive things of ALAP, as opposed to the Dramatists Guild, which I'm also a member of, and I think everybody should be a member of the Dramatists Guild. Absolutely. There's so many great things about the Dramatists Guild, but what is wonderful about ALAP is because we are smaller and regional, we actually get to know each other. Dane Uni was just saying this at the Playwrights Directors Producers Exchange, which we did at 11 o'clock. And he was saying he just moved here from New York and really was appreciating the supportive atmosphere that he's come to experience here. And I think that comes from the fact that playwrights are a minority.
Thanks for that. Sarah, there was a question, though, that I wanted to...
Excuse me, we're just about to begin the program, so I'd like to suggest that each of you mute yourselves unless you're one of our two speakers, Lisa Soland and Leon Martell. My name is Mona Deutsch-Miller, and I'm about to introduce our program. We still have a couple of minutes. Welcome, everyone. We're so glad to see you. If you're not one of our speakers, please stop your video and mute yourself. By muting yourself, you'll avoid our having unwanted feedback, which is what was happening a moment ago. If you were tuning in before, we were chatting about ALAP, and you were hearing from our treasurer and the producer of our daily digest and our emails, Julius Galacki. Julius provides wonderful historical information about theater in LA and other matters of interest, in addition to making sure that we all get news about submission opportunities, readings, workshops, and productions. And may there be many more productions once the pandemic is over. It's got to be over one of these days, right? So I will just wait a few more seconds, and then I will welcome everybody officially. I'm welcoming you now unofficially. Nothing like staring at the clock on your computer until that 29 turns into a 30.
Especially when your computer's on Eastern time. It drives me crazy.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. We are so delighted to have you all here. And for those of you joining us on Facebook or ALAP's YouTube channel, thank you so much for doing it that way. For those of you who have not turned off your video, please do that now so that everybody can concentrate on our wonderful speakers. And when I say wonderful speakers, I really mean it, because this panel for me is an absolute personal treat. I have had the privilege of studying with each of our speakers. I just want to say a few words about ALAP. Welcome, everyone, and also thank the committee of people that put this two-day festival together. So, my name is Mona Deutsch-Miller. I'm the president of the board of the Alliance of Los Angeles Playwrights, an organization that's been in existence since 1993. After the untimely and sudden death of Dan Berkowitz, who was co-chairing this organization with John Dorff, and they both did just a phenomenal amount of work for approximately 20 years together. John decided to retire, and I, together with other people who felt very grateful to ALAP for creating a playwright community, an artistic community, and a welcoming community, decided we had to step up. We did not want to see ALAP bite the dust. So the people who have produced this festival are, and I thank them all from the bottom of my heart, our committee chairperson, Gary Young, who unfortunately could not be with us this weekend because of a death in the family, Nancy Beverly, David Datz, Greg Jones Ellis, Alexio Flores, who's handling tech for this meeting, Julius Galacki, whom some of you just heard from, our treasurer, Lee Kennicott, myself, Mona Deutschmiller, and Tom Mizuraka. And the members of the board have also been very helpful. And I believe the only board member I haven't mentioned is Brian Rain. In any event, ALAP is here as a volunteer service and support organization for playwrights. We gratefully accept all donations. We have special rates for full-time students. We're a steal, people. You ought to join us. For $45 a year. You get access to an incredible artistic community. You can learn from your peers. You can learn from superstars. You can go to free seminars and panels. We've had one almost every month this year. We've talked about genre in theater. We've talked about writing and rewriting. If you're interested in it, if it has something to do with theater, we're going to talk about it at some point. So I urge you, if you haven't joined ALAP, check out our website, laplaywrights.org. That's the old proper spelling, like a wheelwright, laplaywrights.org. Or you can contact me, Mona DM, at laplaywrights.org if you have questions. Now, it is my great pleasure to introduce our two speakers for a stupendous panel on dialogue. And I've had the great personal pleasure of studying with each of them, learning from each of them. And I can tell you, these people are not only phenomenal teachers, they are supportive, they teach with love, they teach with an innate, inherent sense of community and support and connectedness to humanity. Our two speakers are Leon Martell and Lisa Soland. And what we've given you today are people who are not only experienced playwrights, directors, actors, who have been in the trenches, who have hundreds of productions, who have directed hundreds of productions, but also people who are experienced theater educators. So I'm counting on them to not only know what it's like to be involved in this magical mystery of making theater happen, but be able to explain to us how to make it happen, which is not easy. Leon Martell, some of you may know him from Duck's Breath Mystery Theater, which has toured around the country. It's a marvelous comedic, quasi-improvisational troupe. He is a beloved instructor at UCLA Extension, recipient of many awards of popularity, and always very creative and provocative and helpful in his teaching. And I mentioned to him one exercise that he did in a class I was fortunate enough to take many years ago. He put maps on the floor. We didn't know what was coming. The floor was strewn with maps. He urged us each to find one that meant something to us, spoke to us. And I'm crawling around the floor and I find the Andaman Sea. And I had been to Thailand and actually gone for a swim in the Andaman Sea. So I took that one. And then after we had our maps, we each received the assignment in this playwriting course of writing an anthem for the place on the map we had found. And it was amazing how each of us, just those words, an anthem, immediately imported so many rules and structures so that you knew, without even knowing how you knew if you were writing an anthem, it was going to be, and I'm getting a question in the chat, yes, please record. And you'll all probably get a message that this meeting is being recorded. But simply, you knew some things about the requirements for language, for diction, for rhythm, just from that instruction, write an anthem. So his class was absolutely fantastic. This is someone who has worked with Irene Fernandez, with Sam Shepard, with Padua playwrights in their early days. He's been around and toured around the country, and you are so lucky, everybody, to be hearing from Leon. Now, Lisa, Los Angeles had a big loss when Lisa Soland left around 12 and a half years ago to move to Tennessee, but Los Angeles' loss was Tennessee's gain. Lisa has been running playwriting workshops all over the country. I encountered her in the All Original Playwrights workshop, which I took more than once, of course, because anybody who takes a Lisa Soland workshop wants to take it more than once. Many years ago, her plays have been produced all over the country. In addition to being a writer, her writer resume alone was so long, and she cautioned me, well, this is just my writer resume. It wasn't her director resume. It wasn't her resume as a singer. It wasn't her resume as an actor. And it wasn't even her resume as a publisher. So I'm going to be brief. But you should know that in addition to teaching workshops, often under the name All Original Playwrights Workshop, but not always, around the country, Lisa Soland's plays have been published on many, many, many occasions by Samuel French. Her plays are usually in the Best Of anthology. A current work that's been touring is Sergeant York, about the great hero of World War I. As a publisher, she has published a variety of matters, children's books, anthologies of plays, and more. She is the recipient of numerous grants over the years from various organizations. She has been teaching at Maryville College and giving special workshops there. She is also on the theater faculty for playwriting at Lincoln Memorial University. So I'm sure that you are going to enjoy a dialogue about dialogue between Leon Martell and Lisa Soland. And I turn it over to them. Again, I remind you all, please mute your video, and that is stop your video and mute your sound, and then we can have a Q&A, which I'll moderate at the end. Thank you both so much for joining us.
Okay. Are we in the, what's happening now? Lisa, how are you?
Good, it's good to see you again.
Okay, good to see you. We just met online like not long ago, but we had a great time at least meeting each other and talking, a lot in common. So you, were you going to start out? We talked about you jumping in, and then I'll sort of like supplement and we'll go back and forth.
Yeah, why don't you start with the 3 things we talked about and your first thing?
Okay, you mean that quote?
Yes, and designed today's hour. And then after your first point, I'll jump in with my.
Okay. All right. Hi, everybody. I love quotes just because they're metaphors, right? It doesn't, a quote doesn't give you all the information. It leads you into more information. And as we were talking, one of the quotes that really brought things to mind for us, even though he wasn't a playwright, as far as I know, William Faulkner, saying that a writer needs three things: experience, observation, and imagination, any two of which, or at times any one of which, can supply the lack of the others. And we talk about where you get your ideas and where you get your language for your plays. It's often through experience. So a lot of my early stuff was about being a broke down farmer in Vermont. I was talking about that before. I grew up, with an outhouse and no bathtub and plowing fields with horses. And that was my first thing, was getting those stories out. That was the experience. And then observation, just seeing the people, and as we've talked about, learning their language, the things that are important to them. And last, imagination is being able to see what would people be like in the future, past, whatever else, from what you experience, and applying those elements. So those are things that I know inspire me. I mentioned before, as we were talking, I wrote two plays, one about my play called Beautiful in the Extreme, that's about Meriwether Lewis, who of Lewis and Clark. And do people know what Lewis did when he got home? Committed suicide. Which made me go, what the heck makes an American hero commit suicide? So then I did tons of research. I read everything there was about Lewis and Clark. In fact, my wife says I bored my way out of a traffic ticket in Montana. I didn't think there was a speed limit. I was going too fast. And the cop stops us and he says, "Why are you up here?" And I started telling Lewis and Clark stories, and he just almost went to sleep and said, "Just take a warning and go away." But research. And then my next play was about railroad workers, and I was exhausted. I went, I'm just going to make up stuff. My Lewis and Clark play, people said, "Wow, you did so much research. It was so detailed." And then in my railroad worker play says, "Wow, you did so much research. It was detailed. It was imagination." It was because I'm assuming everybody here is adults. We have experiences. We know the way people work. We know the way things happen. And so we're jumping off from there. I'm babbling on, but Lisa, go ahead.
Awesome. I could listen to you talk forever.
No, thank
We
you.
talked for 2 hours in our meeting to discuss what we were going to talk about today, and I had a great time. And we ended up recording it halfway through because it was great stuff we were talking about. And for Leon to see it, I put it on YouTube. So it's out there. You guys can look it up. But we didn't want to talk about it till after this meeting. But I know Mona's going to record this, and it's going to be available to everybody in ALAP. ALAP is awesome. Mona, thanks for having me today. And I see people in here that I love so much, like Wendy and Eugenia. So it's good to see you guys. I can't really see you, but I know you can see me. So the thing that I wanted to talk about first is that here's the dilemma. You, as a playwright, trying to write good dialogue, I would rather say truthful dialogue, truthful to the situation, the characters, the conflict, right? So truthful dialogue as opposed to good, because we don't want to always, that good thing can really taunt you for your entire life. But anyway, the dilemma with writing plays is that we only have dialogue to tell the story. Yes, you have stage direction, you have action, and you should, but anything that's heard by the audience is dialogue. It's not like a novelist who's got narrative. Their narrative is our stage directions. We've got to know how to write dialogue. Now, here's the dilemma. In dialogue, 95% of what we say is not what we mean, right? So you've got 5% of what you really mean. And people rarely come out and say what they really mean. So think about that. Think about the dilemma of being a playwright. I know it well because when I came to write my first children's book in 1999, I thought, oh my gosh, this is so much fun. I can say what's going on I'm just not limited to the dialogue, but I love the construction of writing for the theater. The restrictions are your freedom. But anyway, so what is dialogue? If 95% of what your characters are saying on the stage is not true, because you know what? If they say the truth, I lose interest. If they say what's really going on, but it would be interesting if you had one character saying what was really happening in the room, pointing out the elephant in the room, and all the other characters are doing what we all do, which is disguising what's really going on, disguising our nerves, disguising this, avoiding the truth here, avoiding the truth there. That is, I think if you can really pay attention when you're developing your stories with what you say and what you leave unsaid, how long you wait to say it, how long you wait to say the truth. You withhold. That's really important. So my first point is that dialogue, people say, gosh, her dialogue sounds like real people talking. No, it's heightened language that sounds normal. That's the trick, because theater is not normal life. Theater is heightened. What deserves to be on the stage? Larger than life, things that are larger than life, and that includes your dialogue. The trick is, though, is to say it in a very normal way. Everything in the theater is consolidated. You compact language, you compact your characters, and because you have so little space, I think of playwriting, and I've written all the genres. It's somewhere between poetry and a novel, right? And poetry, man, you do not waste one letter, let alone a word. Novelists probably would say that too, but there is a room to breathe, but playwriting is right in the middle there. It is somewhere between poetry and a novel. And because we are limited and we must consolidate more than the novelist, what you do use has to be the most important. Why don't you speak, Leon, unless it's one of your points about when we met and when we talked, you talked about taking out every other line. So you write a big monologue and then you go in there and take out every other line. Call it consolidation.
Yeah, and then that's an old John Stepling, if you know that playwright, his exercise. I've stolen exercises from everybody. The good thing is usually when I meet them again and say, oh, I stole your exercise, and I tell them, they go, I never heard of that. What did you do? Because we continue to mutate them. And but the also bring another quote from Hemingway talking about he writes like an iceberg, that 7/8 of it should be underwater. 7/8 of what you're writing isn't seen. That's subtext. We all go subtext. And it's John Stepling exercise. And I'll throw a few exercises during the course of this today. In fact, Felix and Tony, they've been subjected me forever, so they've probably already heard these. But the idea being to write it, not take out every other sentence, but cross out every other line on the page. Because that's how people talk. We don't talk in complete sentences. We don't have complete finished ideas. And because what we're thinking and feeling is bigger than necessarily what's being said. Also, something that Lisa was saying before, and it struck me, most of the time in our real lives, we're trying to be nice.
Right.
That's part of our job, to get along with people. The people in drama aren't getting along. That's why it's drama. And so it's letting those things explode through that we don't let explode through in normal life, because we couldn't get along if we did that. And one of the points I want to bring up, it's like, as I also teach theater history, and Aristotle. And Aristotle, again, he called his work on drama the Poetics, because just as Lisa was saying, there's there's not that separation in ancient Greece between poetry, theater, and religion. Again, spirituality, it's all going together, things that move the spirit. And coming back to, and you probably heard again, the 6 parts of drama as according to Aristotle, where he talks about, right, like plot, the story that's being told. Of course, in ancient Greece, everybody already knew all the stories. Everybody knew the story. It's how is the playwright going to tell it? What's going to be emphasized? And again, second, character. Who are you focusing on? And even as a writer, my career as a legit playwright, after being a goofball comedian for 20 years, what came out of writing a one-man show, which started from a monologue about an incident in the news, and then being all the other characters. So all the other aspects of that story. So as I'm writing dialogue for a play, I'll go get inside the skin of each of the characters to see, because maybe the character that you thought was the most important isn't the one who this play is really about. So finding character, theme, idea, thing that's pushed through. And then something I want to emphasize is, diction, the words that are chosen. Okay, the words that are distinctive to that character. And then one that gets simplified often is music, in terms of what the sound is of the whole piece. I teach a class in creating monologues, and at one point I have everybody sing their monologue. And that doesn't mean that it has to be good singing. My favorite singers are terrible singers. Leonard Cohen, Tom Waits, Lou Reed. I love those guys, and no one's going to put them in the opera. But it's the musicality. I think of Doll's House. Ibsen's A Doll's House was called, the door slam heard round the world. That sound that made the culmination of that play. And so finding what the music is of your language. So even singing it and just seeing where it goes. And last, spectacle, because people like to see stuff. But again, Aristotle put it last. If you're writing scripts for, Fast and Furious, it's one thing. And again, I've written action movies. That's a whole other thing. But we're only in it for the money. And so thinking of again, the music, the characterization, those things. And I wanted to address Aristotle at this point. Tag it back off to Lisa, next point that we talked about.
Yes, dovetailing on what you said, I did have a good example of this. Okay, so Samuel French published Truth Be Told, which I based on Talking With by Jane Martin, which you all know by now, Jane Martin was not one person. But what I found interesting about what Samuel French did was they wanted to put out a monologue anthology, right? So what they took monologues that had been written by their playwrights. They took a couple of mine, one called Sensitivity, right? And in the original play, Sensitivity is 3.5 pages long. And this is, published plays, which is not your manuscript playwrights. It's the, when Samuel French first published me, it's funny, I sent them my manuscript and I tried to copy, what they did in their plays. And then that was like almost 30 years ago now. I started writing when I was 5. Anyway, they told me about how to structure, how to format a play, that's different. So 3.5 pages here is not 3.5 manuscript pages, which most of you probably know. So anyway, they took that monologue and they, like Leon said, just struck out what seemed to be, they were cutting off my appendages, every other line, but they got it down to 1 page, right? Because they wanted to create this to help high school students and young people, and I guess everybody, go out and audition for URTA finals and those things where you're actually timed in your monologues. And when I got this in the mail, I looked at the length of it and I, nearly died. And then I read it and I realized how much I had overwritten it, right? When you overwrite, you steal from the actor. If you leave things unsaid, but you do it with such a craft, you give the actor an opportunity to play something that isn't written. And that's where their real talent shows. If you love actors, it helps. Leon and I talked about this. It helps to be an actor because you have a compassionate heart for what they're having to deal with, right? And I started out as an actor and then slowly morphed into a playwright. So I loved actors. I wanted to write for them to set them up to win. And when you do that, you leave things unsaid that you imagine they're going to be able to play. And that's something that Samuel French did when they cut. They cut, basically, it ended up being 1/3 of what I had originally written, and it still worked. Okay, so the second point that I wanted to make, my second bullet point, many of us, all of us writers, get to a point where we're stuck. Now, we'll start out with this exercise, obviously, as well, but I use it often when I get stuck because the muse in me can begin things so easily, right? The beginning is so much fun, and you're writing and it's coming and it's flowing, and then suddenly it doesn't flow. This is one of the tricks I use, okay? And it came because of my background studying acting. This was my absolutely favorite book. Charles Nelson Riley studied with Uta Hagen. Charles Nelson Riley was my mentor and my main acting teacher. And he quoted Uta Hagen all the time. She taught at HB Studios in New York City. And here's the thing, okay? You might want to write this down. You ask the questions, okay? The questions, what are they? Who am I? And of course, being the character that you're trying to write. Who am I? Where am I? What is my relationship to the people in the room? Now, here's the most important thing. What do I want? Now, you could go on and on. There's a ton of questions. And I'm telling you, these questions made me a good actor because they help you focus on what's going on in the head of the character that you're trying to write or act. The cool thing about playwriting is you get to act all the characters, right? And when you're writing the play, you get to put the play together like a puzzle, which is just so much fun, as you all know. What do I want, right? And how does that, think about somebody in the room doesn't want me to have that. Okay, there's your conflict. If you don't have conflict, bring up those questions, you know? And we're taught early on in life, like Leon and I were talking about, not to really come out and ask what you want, right? So how do you try to get what you want? It's all, isn't it so silly? It's like life would be so much easier if we could just say, you know what? Okay, so 20 years ago, my husband asked me out, you know, on our first date. And he goes, let's go out tomorrow night. And I said, I'm hungry now. You know, isn't that interesting dialogue? I'm hungry now. So you can have one of your characters saying exactly what they mean, you know, and, you know, my background, let's say I'm a character in a play. My background in the play is I've had it. I'm not screwing around. I'm not playing any games. I am going to say, all right, right? So that's my subtext going on. So what's going to come out of this character's mouth is, I'm hungry now. And he laughed. And we were married 5 months later. So the point is, if you get stuck, ask yourself the question. Most important question is, from the character's point of view that you're focusing on, what do I want? What's in my way? You know, when I was an actor, I would be waiting in the wings about to enter. And that's the thing that would go through my head. Okay, where am I? I'm in the living room. You know, if it's Agatha Christie, I'm in the living room. These other characters are trying to kill me. You know, what do I want? I want to stay alive. You know, so that same thing that Uta Hagen applied to actors can be applied as a playwright. And, you know, you can get this book to next to nothing on Amazon, and I recommend it. Tag team, Leon.
Okay. Oh, since you're flashing books, this is my favorite at the moment, which is Mike Nichols' A Life. And one of the great things, this is, you know, is an EGOT, I think, not EGOT, but multiple Oscar, blah, blah. And he fails all the time. I mean, there's lots of misery so don't feel bad when you work hard at it and sometimes it doesn't go. Also, what you really see in this is sometimes there's the illusion that a play is supposed to come out like Mozart, supposed to come out perfect the first time. Nobody does that. You want to have readings. Jumping off of what Lisa was saying, I know when I'm writing, it'll be like the character says, no, 1,000 times, no, never, I won't, no. And then the actor just says no, and that's plenty. Because the actor gives you the full impetus of it. Coming off of that too, I wanted to talk about something that Irene Fernandez, who was like my artistic mom, really, I worked with her for like 10 years, both as an actor and studying with her, and sensory details. You can always get into, before we ever started writing, we get into the sensory details of the world of the character. What are they dealing with? Because, and scientists will tell you, the most profound sensory connection that we have is smell. If I said, grandma's living room, chances are something would register. You know what that connection is. So giving the substance to that character, and she would always have us get inside their skin. And I know, again, Uta Hagen and any of the Stanislavski-based, acting approaches, you get inside the skin of the character. So we would take time always going, I still do, take time getting inside the physicality of that character for those sensory details to really fill up their world. And I know some of you probably even use, and I have friends that use the right clothing. I have to be, what's the thing that they are wearing? And I know when I'm acting, and women I know could go along with this, one of the first things I get in rehearsal, I want to have the right shoes. Because I'm going to move differently. My contact with the earth is going to be very different depending if I'm in work boots or if I'm in slippers or if I'm barefoot or whatever, those things. And I know, and I'm old enough to have acted in platform shoes, platform boots in the 70s. And so again, the way that you move and all those things. So finding those things for your character so you can see really what they feel and think at the moment. And another exercise that I stole from somebody, I don't remember who, probably nobody in this room, which is to really see the character that you're writing's face, really envision them clearly, like they're across the table from, like Lisa and I are now, looking at each other this close and seeing them, and then letting them talk to you and say, there's a lot you don't know about me. I always call it the too many beers exercise. If any of you have been in a bar and you're across the table and you've had just one too many beers and they said, you and I really think, and then they come forward with that thing. You know what I think of my job? And they let it out. So giving your characters the opportunity to do that. And that doesn't mean you're going to use it all. That maybe you're going to lose little pieces of it, maybe even one line of it, but really letting them have the opportunity to reveal themselves in that way. Or I think of, I was lucky enough to act for John Patrick Shanley, and before he was John Patrick Shanley, and his plays. If you look at his plays, there's sort of a ongoing thing of he'll let a character sort of wax poetic about a subject, to the point where you go, wow, that's cool, that's great. Wow, that's a little over the top. And immediately when they finish their monologue, another character will say, that's the biggest load of bullshit I ever heard in my life. And then they'll do the counter, which are both aspects of John Patrick Shanley. But it's the romantic that he wants to be, and then the realist, and then the sort of protective person he has to be. And so giving your characters this opportunity, that doesn't mean you're going to use it all, but to get it out and give them that freedom and then edit it back. And in fact, I was telling Lisa, Irene Fernandez used to always say, pardon me, I always do impressions of my mom. And she used to say, I put my playwright hat on and I write and everything is beautiful and I just let it flow and it is so gorgeous and it is wonderful. And then I stop and I take it off and I put on my director hat and I say, who wrote this crap? And then I start to cut. and fix it. But giving yourself the opportunity to let those characters vent and let that stuff come out.
Awesome.
Okay, back to you, Lisa.
I have to tell just a brief story about John Patrick Shanley. He mentored me on my play, The Hand of the Plow. And the one thing that he said, well, he was great. I learned a lot from him. Less is more. But he was talking about titles, and I'll get around to how it's applied to dialogue as well. But there are times when writers that are studying with me get stuck, and I try to explain to them, you don't have to have everything right now. Lightly think on it. And John Patrick Shanley, there was snow. We were in Nashville and there was snow all over, and snow in this area of the country, people go nuts because they don't have the removal equipment and stuff. But we just went out, and we met at this coffee shop, and there was me and I was one of 5 writers and him, and we had coffee and tea on the table. And he took the sugar and the creamer. And because I had asked him, how do you come up with your great titles? Danny and the Deep Blue Sea. I mean, that's awesome. He has some great titles. Beggars in the House of Plenty is just, if you've read that play of his, it's a great title. He wrote Danny and the Deep Blue Sea, right? I'm not losing my mind. Okay. So on the table was a creamer and a sugar, and he moved the creamer and the sugar around. And he said, when I'm trying to come up with a title, I just move the creamer, I move the sugar, I just kind of da-da-da. I'm like, that's what you tell people how to, but really, you guys know what I'm saying. And I tell that to people and they know what I'm saying. You move the creamer and the sugar around and the title comes to you. Well, he gave me The Hand on the Plow. I'd called it The Family Farm. I mean, isn't that boring? The Family Farm. And I had a Bible verse that had just really captured the whole play about that you have to keep your hand to the plow. You can't turn around and look back. Well, it's the same thing with dialogue. If you get stuck, and I'll dovetail this into another bullet point, but if you get stuck, you're not a surgeon. You're not operating on somebody who's got a brain tumor. You have time. You can rewrite. You can go, bleh, I'm gonna write this for now, bleh, because I can rewrite it. I don't know why it is, but we writers think we can't rewrite and we get all nervous. Don't get nervous. It's a play. I can hear Charles Nelson Riley whispering in my ear. You're supposed to have fun. It's a play. Another thing that I do, this is my 3rd bullet point, is when I'm stuck, I imagine that I'm in the play and I look around the room. And Leon talked about this with regards to costumes, but I'm going to refer to it with regards to props. If I don't know what to say next or do next, I look at what we've got and where it is, and I'm in the play and I'm looking around on the stage, or in the reality of the play, the bedroom. What do I have access to? One time I was writing and I didn't know what to say next. And I looked at my coffee mug and it had a quote on the coffee mug. I took the quote right off the coffee mug and put it as the next person's sentence of what they were saying. I thought, what the heck? I have a belief that everything that I need to write the project I'm writing is in the room right here. If I decide to go for a walk, there's clues all around me. It's almost like they're little gems floating in the air. And I just have to increase my awareness and pay attention to what I'm not seeing yet. And for me in that one moment, it was the coffee mug. There it was. And I just took it. And then Don Nigro taught me this too. It will take you in a direction that you're not ever expecting to go. So one time on Facebook, I put on there that I had a dream that I was on a bunk bed. I was on the bottom bunk bed and a cow was on the top bunk bed. And Don Nigro said to me, that's a play. I'm like, how can that be a play? You know what I'm saying? But don't be afraid to go to the weirdest places. And who better to teach me that than Don Nigro? He is very willing to go to those places. But, you know, you could be sitting at your desk as a character in the play, and you open up the desk and suddenly there is, what's this? Oh my gosh, it's a pair of glasses. You know, I'm gonna be Walter Brennan, you know. Don't be afraid to utilize what, you know, any idea, anything around and put it in the play. Don't be afraid to go where you didn't expect to go. Okay, Leon.
Oh, I'm just in shock because I went to school with Don Nigro and we dated the same woman, but that was a long time ago. I hadn't heard you mention him before. The theater. Anyway, jumping ahead, I think I want to get to comedy because we were talking about that and elements of comedy. One of my favorite quotes about comedy is from Eddie Izzard. If people know Eddie Izzard, who I think is just brilliant. And it was a conversation with him and John Cleese, who's another brilliant comedian. And yeah, and so Eddie Izzard's talking to John Cleese and he says, I know what you do. You talk completely serious about things that are absolute bollocks, and you come talk total bollocks about things that are absolutely serious. And again, it was a great observation. I'm like, boom, that's it. Or another quote that I love, it's Oscar Wilde saying, if you want to tell people the truth, you have to make them laugh. Otherwise, they'll kill you. And so, again, making things seem ridiculous, and also comes to things that Lisa was talking about, raising the stakes, that the stakes are higher in comedy than they are in tragedy because they're fighting so savagely over something that seems insignificant to us. And so we can laugh about it on the outside, but it's still about us. And as Lisa was talking about finding things in your life, it was interesting, again, in this, I would have no own stock in this company at all. I think it's a great book. Mike Nichols talking about he's directing these plays, these epic plays that are some of the iconic things of our past. And everybody goes, this is like just your life. And you go, yeah, it's like whatever his life was going through, that was showing up on the stage. Because that's what the purpose is, to communicate those things, our observations, our feelings, our grasp on humanity, which is why even ancient Greece, it was mandatory to go to the theater. They would take guys out of prison, make them see the show, and then put them back in prison because that's the only way you could be a human being, because it was a religious thing, taking to the extra step. And also another thing they wanted to hit on, protagonist. Lisa and I had this conversation about and I know, sure, you're all past this, but the idea that the protagonist is being the good guy. No, we don't. We know that's not that anymore. But the idea that I hold close to my bosom is that it's from the Greek for agon, as in agony, as in suffering, as in struggle, as in the person who's struggling for something, which comes back to the thing Lisa was talking about of what do you want? Why are you in this? Why is this character in this scene? And everybody wants something. Oh, one of my favorite, I went to the University of Iowa for graduate school. I was a director, but you come out a writer, whether you like it or not, at Iowa. Everybody comes out a writer. And Don Nigro was there, like a lot of people were there. One of my favorite quotes of that time, Henderson Forsyth, which you might not know that name. He was in the original production of Streetcar Named Desire. And he played the doctor. And I'm sure you, if you know that play, you know that it's Blanche Dubois. She has a complete nervous breakdown. She's raped by Stanley. And at the end, a doctor comes and takes her out. Well, Henderson Forsyth was walking down the street. And when he was just cast in the show, and he runs into a friend, and the friend says, Henderson, how you doing? And he says, oh, I'm doing great. I'm just in a new Tennessee Williams play. He says, oh, great. What's it called? It's called Streetcar Named Desire. And Henderson Forsyth was playing the doctor. And then they said, oh, what's it about? And he says, oh, it's about a doctor who takes a crazy lady away.
Oh, that's great.
And every character has a three-dimensional life. Every character thinks the play is about them because their play is about them. And again, you probably know the term like inciting incident, where the characters, when I always talk about Oedipus, a character has a full life, blah, 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 but we can't put it all on stage because it's too darn long. So we decide what elements are we going to show. And usually it's a matter of they found a way to have peace in their life, and then something happens.
It doesn't happen any other day.
Yep. And then they can't maintain the balance they've maintained throughout their whole life. And so they have to take action to find a new way to maintain order. So thinking of what is, and in fact, another exercise that like Felix and Tony all know, because I do this all the time, it's, and I like to get inside the character's body, physically moving the way that they do, physically, and setting them at their occupation. I always do an exercise where people do an occupation that they did, particularly in their youth, because most of those jobs are physical and repetitive and not very, very intelligent. Like you just have to do something over and over again. But then finding all the sensory details, then getting inside the character at their occupation. I say occupation because maybe their occupation is getting a tan sitting by the pool, whatever it is. But then once you have them fully, somebody shows up and interrupts them and needs to tell them something, which can often be the inciting incident, the thing that tips the scale, that makes them be unbalanced and have to respond. We want things to be disturbed, things to be knocked out of balance, so the character has to find a way to regain a new order.
Right. In Streetcar Named Desire, Blanche coming to visit throws that whole world that we get the sense was running perfectly fine without her. But her visit starts, that's the inciting incident.
Yep.
And you've got the rising action, which only rises because the conflict increases. And your conflict has to increase over the period of the play. Sorry to interrupt you.
No. I'm pretty much squared away. Go ahead.
Oh, great.
Yep, next time. Go ahead.
Okay, so one of the things that I run into, and I'm sure Leon does too, because we're all supposed to be nice, is that some writers back away from conflict. They don't want to write the conflict. I wanted to speak on this because here's the way to overcome that. And it goes back to Aristotle. Okay, the gift of catharsis. Okay, the reason people love the theater, there's a million reasons, I know, but it has a gift. And what happens when your protagonist or the carrier of the action, the one who is pushing the story forward, like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, right? So you identify with the protagonist. So the audience is pulling for the main character. This is, some of us pull for the minor characters. I know all of that. But in general, we pull for the protagonist and we identify with them. In a sense, we are them. And then when they go through their difficulty, which they should, if you're going to give the audience this great gift, and it is a great gift, it's why we love the theater and why we love art in general, I think. You go through it with that protagonist, and when they turn around and they are a conquering hero, or they've pushed their way through that and there is a change in them, the change also happens in us, right? So that's the gift of catharsis. So don't back away from writing conflict. It's why people are pulled to the theater, because most of us can't say what we really want. So we live these not quiet lives, but lives that maybe aren't as authentic as we would prefer. So we go to the theater and we walk in and we witness magic happening on the stage. It's just, there's nothing like it. And think about that when you're writing your dialogue, that it's not dialogue for TV. It's not dialogue for film. It's dialogue for the theater. So you want to generate something in the air that can't be seen, because that's what separates theater from the other dialogue genres. Okay, so this leads into my third point, and we may not get to all of these, but we're certainly having good conversation, huh, Leon?
I think so. I'm having fun. I hope hope other people are too.
It's hard as a thespian to be talking and see like these faces here, but not hearing anybody's response. But Mona's given a thumbs up, so good. All right. Okay, here's a really good trick, something you should consider, and it is a trick. Oh, thank you, Mr. Block. The trick is this. Okay, if you're writing and your characters are talking with each other and one asks a question, in real life, we answer the question. But it's more interesting if you don't for the theater, okay? Don't answer the question. Your character asks the question, the other character does not answer them. I'll give you an example. Okay, so let's just say off the top of my head that you've got a mother and then you've got her teenage daughter, okay? And the mother, let's say it's 6 o'clock in the morning and she's sitting at the kitchen table and the daughter walks in. Okay, this is like such a dumb example, but you'll get the point. And the mother says, "Where have you been?" And the daughter says, "Why do you ask?" "I'm asking because you live under my roof." Not anymore. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Don't answer the question.
If any of you know, whose line is it anyway? There's the whole back and forth, just questions, and that escalates. And as soon as somebody gives an answer, it deflates to somebody. Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, the comedians use that a lot, but don't answer the question. I see it in amateur writing a lot, where a question will come up and they answer it. Here's the other thing, and I don't know if I'll be able to get this, but if somebody says, I was going to go to the store, but I don't really want to go alone. Would you go with me? I was thinking it would be more fun if you went with me. An amateur writer will say, "No, I don't really want to go to the store. I had in mind that I was going to go down, and since there's snow, I was going to sled." This is such a stupid example, but I can literally go in there as an editor and just strike out, never answer the question. "Would you go with me? I just thought it would be really fun to not go alone. I'm going sledding." You know what I mean? It's like, you don't have to answer the question. "Would you go with me? Kathy's coming at 3 o'clock. You know what I mean? Don't answer the question. I'm telling you, your plays will start to go boom, 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 boom. You can just, the other thing is, you don't have to learn it right away. Right. Ask somebody to read it who's learned how to cut out the answers to questions. And then they will just show you, cut, and then look at that. I tell my writers all the time, okay, I'm going to edit your 10-minute play. But when I edit it, I want you to print out your old version, and I want you to print out my edited version of that. And John Patrick Shanley helped me with this too. And you just go down and you will not believe what you didn't need. It's usually answering the question. Do you like this? I'm going out with my husband tonight, and I didn't know what to wear. Where are you guys going? That's so much more interesting. Yes, here's an amateur playwright. "Oh, yes, that's really lovely. Where are you going to go?" It's like, where are you going? They have shitty crab. Don't answer the question. And then it comes out later that they thought you looked horrible in the dress. It's really a trick of withholding information and when to reveal that information. So that little trick of not answering the question will really help a lot. Okay, Leon.
Yeah, I could jump into, never let them get ahead of you. in terms of the audience, that you always, and that's one of the things that keep them going, that keeps the audience engaged. One of our big tasks is to keep them engaged and trying to figure out, again, the what? Because if the question's answered, then they know and they can sit. Because we all know, you're all theater artists, so you all know, you've been to the show where, oh, I bet they're going to do this. And you start thinking about, I have to do laundry tomorrow. And you come back, oh yeah, they did that. And then once you get ahead of them, you're dead. And so you want to leave. And Leon Katz, who is great instructor, both at Yale and then he worked at the Taper for a long time at UCLA. Talked about gapping, making that leap. Pinter does that all the time, right? Is the idea making your audience have to fill in. So the challenge is always to leave enough space so that they have to fill in and yet not leave so much of the time that they get lost. Yeah. But it's like finding that, and you get that, again, readings, like coming back to this book, they spend readings and working on the script So don't feel bad if the first reading, it doesn't do everything that you want it to do. Another exercise that came to mind as we were talking, that I do all the time, it's reaching that point of climax that she was talking about, the crisis, where the voices are about to collide and write what you think happens, just as a narrative. And this happens. And I always use the example of Oedipus, right? Oedipus finds out, oh, it's me. I hope I didn't spoil this play for anybody. Oedipus, oh, it's me. I'm the cause. And, in the regular version, he goes into the palace and he sees Jocasta hanging and he gouges his own eyes out. And he says, exile me because I said it should be a fate worse than death. So that's one choice. So when you think you know what your ending is, right? And then I ask everybody in 5 minutes each time to do it 4 more times with different choices. The character makes a different choice. So if Oedipus goes, these oracles, they lie. They're always just making up. No, look, it's a plague. It'll go away. You just got to wait. Everybody wear a mask. It'll be fine. And so you have a different, and then another choice, which would be, I'm just going in the palace for a minute here. And this guy, wait, don't anybody come in. I'm going in. And then he sneaks out the back and he heads back to Corinth, where they're going to make him king. And so again, choices, I only let you use Men from Outer Space once and out of the 5, but because there's always those options that you have. And I find when I do that, I find something to borrow from each of those things to combine into that dialogue, into what that moment of catharsis, that climax is. Finding those things. And again, gapping that space when you think about, again, like a Pinter or so many contemporary writers that make you do big jumps as an audience, that make you fill things in. And one of the things, again, I always tell my students, one of the things I love about the theater is it's such a big tent. There's all sorts of possibilities in the style of writing and the things you're doing and the subjects you're addressing. And people on either end of the tent often hate each other's work, but that doesn't matter. There's room for all of us inside this big space. And also you can borrow elements. I always use the example, Music Man. I went to Iowa, so I was a Music Man. And the train at the beginning is that rhythmatized speech. If you know Music Man, he's a music man. It's a what? It's a music man. And that was taken from an Eastern European play where everyone's going to hell on this train. But the same technique then borrowed and put to salesmen in the Midwest, except they're not going to hell. They're going to Iowa. And so finding those things to borrow from other styles as you see them and go, how do I make this my version of that? How do I take that thing and put it into my style, into my elements of working?
That's awesome. I want to take a class with you, Leon.
And I'd support with you too. Yeah, for sure.
Another topic that I wanted to talk about, and Mona's going to let us know when we're almost out of time, but this is really important, okay? And this is the question that I asked myself as a writer when I sat down to write my play called Thread Count, okay? Here's another trick that I use. if you can set up writing good dialogue by selecting characters that are unique unto themselves. Okay. So in thread count, I had a woman from South Dakota with that Fargo accent. She shows up in a fine linen department in Macy's in New York City. And she meets the clerk who is selling fine linen. And the idea came when I was going down the escalator in a Macy's. I turned at the last minute and I saw a display bed, and there was a sign on the display bed. It said, "Please don't sit on the display." Okay. So I thought I need to write that. Okay. So there's only 10 minutes left or to closing. And there's a woman from South Dakota who's been in the hot New York sun all day. She wants someplace to sit down and it's cool, in this department store. And there's a guy from London who's, worked his way up and he's very particular. I based it on Charles Nelson Riley. So you've got, an English accent and a Fargo accent. So you see how even the accents and knowing where your characters are from will directly impact the way they talk, and it can help you with your conflict when you have opposing characters. And then at one point, at a critical point in the play, I hope you'll read it. It's called Thread Count, 3-character play, but it's mainly 2 characters, boy and a girl. It's what they call a meet cute comedy. The janitor comes in, at a key point, right? You got a display bed. Very funny. I thought it was funny, and you better write to make yourself laugh or you're in trouble. It won't be fun for you anymore. But he was like a janitor type. His job was cleaning up the department store after it closed down. So if you throw people in the room that are unique unto themselves, it's bound to impact the dialogue and make it unique. People always said, you should be able to look on the page and take away the character name. I know every single person in here has heard somebody say that. And I've tried to do that, and I don't know, but I don't know if you can actually do it. But the idea behind that is a good one, and it starts by the creation of the character. When you're actually creating the character, where are they from? How do they talk? Those rhythms are going to impact how they come across to the audience and impact ultimately what they want. So that's it.
Yep. Jumping into on rhythms, when you think of if it's a choir, if you've got someone who's the bass, who's the tenor, who's the alto, who's the mezzo soprano, and thinking how that weaves together. Absolutely same idea.
I love it. Like an orchestra. Yeah, your plays are an orchestra. Dialogue is music. I hear ba 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 da 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 ba da 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 da. I mean, I hear those rhythms. I came from a musical family, and nobody else in my family of 7 were playwrights, but it's the music that inspired my writing. Absolutely, Leon. Thank you.
I actually hate to jump in because I would gladly listen to you talk some more. So my proposal is I'll give you each a few minutes to say anything that you had wanted to say that you might not have said, or maybe the other person provoked a new thought that you'd like to share with us. And then we'll take some questions. Lisa, would you like to add anything or?
Well, I want to say something really odd, but you who know me know that I'm odd anyway. But, I studied with Burt Reynolds. I was one of his apprentices at his theater, and I got to work with him, as some of you might have. Wonderful man. But I was very young when we first worked with him, and we sat in his garage at Valhalla, his place there in Tequester, Jupiter, Florida. And he asked us all a question. He said, what is every scene in every play about? And I thought, gosh, I sat there. I remember thinking with my little young brain, And he had to tell us, none of us knew. Of course, you don't know what somebody's thinking sometimes. It's hard when you have a teacher and students, the teacher's trying to get you to say what they want you to say. But here's the point. The point is he said, love. Love. Every scene in every play. And when I think about Burt Reynolds, that's what he played as an actor. You know, he played the love in every scene, regardless of what play he got. And he won 5 People's Choice Awards for Best Actor. I mean, there's a reason for that. You know, the thing that I guess I would like to say to close up is, you know, you can't write characters better than the person who you are, in a sense. And I remember when I was young, people saying, just wait till you get older. You're going to have so much more to bring to the plate. Don't be afraid to bring who you are to the plate, and don't be afraid to live a full life. Don't be afraid. You know, you are an extraordinary artist. Don't be afraid. You know, there's not a lot of money in this business. You know, we find our way. We surely do. But don't back away from the blank page. Be courageous and put who you are on the page. Don't be afraid. Take chances. And hopefully your plays will be about a better world than we're in right now. Write better than the world. That's my closing statement.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And now I'm going to turn it to Leon for his closing statement.
That's hard to follow, but there's a quote that I think jumps off of that, which is one of my favorite ones, which is George Bernard Shaw. And he says, the man who writes about himself and his own time is the only one who writes about all people and about all time. So it's putting your heart onto the page that connects with the audience. Oh, another book I want to flash. If people saw Good Lord Bird, that the TV series on what's his name, great actor,
Ethan Hawke.
Ethan Hawke did, was great, and I went wow, and I had to go get the book by James McBride. And this is, Deacon King Kong, writing about his neighborhood in New York, African-American neighborhood, all African-American characters. But when I read it, I see my great uncles, I see my family, and it's about family and through his lens, but it's so personal, it becomes universal. And again, those are the things I think, and rather than, I am old, and rather than having the old perspective, I'm still working out things from when I was 8 years old, and like finding the heart of who you are and being able to share it, because that's what we all care about.
Well, I'm sure that everyone who's listening to you is as grateful and appreciative as I am. For you people listening, there's a little thing on the bottom of your screen called reactions. So I heartily encourage you to clap, to give them a thumbs up, so that they can know. In fact, if you want to put your screens on, if anybody has a question, you can put it in the chat. But yes, the comments you're getting, you two are extraordinary. Your words are inspiring. I'm a writer because of Lisa Soland, someone wrote. So these are very, very positive messages, as I knew they would be, because I've had the pleasure of studying with each of you, and I'm personally so grateful.
Thank you.
So, do we have any questions coming up in the chat? Let's see now. Have either of you collaborated with other playwrights?
I was in a sketch group and collaborated with 5 guys for 20 years. And it was y'all get in a room and scream, and whoever gets exhausted first. Plus also though, we were doing pass the hat shows to make a living. So we were able to say, we'll do it your way and then my way, your way and my way. And then when you're doing it that way, eventually go, his way is making more money. Yeah, I like that way. you sort of learn in that possibility. But I've collaborated with composers. I think Lisa, maybe you have too, writing the John Henry musical, Penka Kuneva, who wrote it. I just had a little monologue that was going to be set to song, and she put music to it, and I wept because of the music, because of what she found in it. Because again, it always wants to be, and as a director, probably Lisa and maybe some of you know, you always just want to assemble the best crew you have, because they'll take the idea and they'll put themselves in it and take it beyond. If it was just you just do it. But no, you want to get those artists who are at least going to bring each of their things to it.
Yes, I think making theater is collaborative in itself. So you've got to be able to work well with your director and the producer. There's got to be good communication. There's got to be really strong boundaries of who's ultimately responsible for each one of those categories. One thing I would advise, I hear more horrible stories about playwrights not liking their directors. You know, I just got to the point over the years I've been writing. I wrote my first play December of 91. It's published in 95 by Samuel French, but it takes that long to, you put the water in the pump, it takes that long to get things moving with theater. It's not like a book where you just write a book and it gets published. I mean, you all know it's got to go through all the things, but the horror stories that I hear are about a playwright not being effectively able to collaborate with their director. And what I want to say about that is I would rather just not do it at all. And here's the thing about life, better just to not do it. Our hearts are too precious. And I say that as an older person now, I just go, no, thank you. And here's the thing, it's not good or bad. It's who you either get along with or who you don't. And it's not good or bad. You've got to be able to respect the other person. This is where the problem happens, the respect toward the playwright. And sometimes directors prefer dead playwrights. And if you've got one of those directors, they're going to want you dead, so just find people that like you and don't try to talk people into liking you. They either like you or they don't. So don't waste your time submitting to the person that's turned down the last 7 plays, okay? It's not your job to go out there in the world and get people to love you. It's your job to go out there and find the ones that do, period.
Yeah. Oh, and one of the things I tell my college students is to find your tribe. Find the people that get your work. And in fact, I'm working with a guy now doing video projects that I started working with in 1970. And I'm godfather to his oldest son, who's an Emmy-winning editor, who's editing the video projects. I mean, it's like finding the people who get you, who you can work together and take care of each other. And yeah, absolutely. And again, it's not, there's people I like as people, but maybe I'm not that fond of their work, but I'll still go, I'll support it, whatever, but I'm not still going to work with them. But you find the people that you can work with and take care of each other in that way. That's important.
Yeah. And you'll know it right away, and don't doubt yourself.
Well, on that note, I think I will, since I'm not seeing questions in the chat, I'm going to note that ALAP is an organization that lets people find their people. We are an artistic community. We have monthly happy hours. You can just drop in. We're doing them on Zoom. Eventually, when the pandemic is over, they'll be in person. But take advantage of this extraordinary time in civilization, really, when people are home, but we have the blessing of technology, so we can see each other and talk to each other. Please come to one of our happy hours. They're announced on our websites. We often have themes of discussion just to get people talking about the craft. My own favorite story about a happy hour is I was sitting in Dan Berkowitz's apartment, which he used to keep practically pitch black. It was like going into a black pit. You could barely see the person sitting next to you. And I had suggested as a topic that we talk about passage of time and plays, because I was always struggling with how do you communicate to the audience, whether it's, next week, next year, whatever. This voice comes out of the darkness near me, and it was E.M. Lewis, but I didn't know who the distinguished prize-winning playwright E.M. Lewis was. I just knew that there was this very nice woman named Ellen next to me. And she said, well, you might take a look at the play Infinite Black Suitcase. So I said, oh, okay. And I wrote that down or put it in my memory. And I go get the play out of the library. Sorry, Ellen, I didn't buy it. And lo and behold, Infinite Black Suitcase is by E.M. Lewis. And it is a fantastic creative use of props to communicate the passage of time. And this was just from going to what we used to call a saloon, and now we call a happy hour. So I invite you all to join me in applauding our absolutely fantastic speakers. And if you're in front of your screens, I hope you'll come back and show us your happy faces. I've received so many wonderful comments in the chat. So I hope you, Leon Martell, and you, Lisa Soland, will look in the chat and see the highly complimentary pieces of gratitude that you've received, because cultivating an attitude of gratitude is how we get through this life the best, I think. And thank you both so much. For people who are still with us, if you want to participate in Pandramatica tomorrow, we have an even fuller day tomorrow than we did today. And of course, our speakers are invited to join us too. After some private sessions, the playpen will continue with the playwrights who got in, where they get to work with actors. And that will go on, but that's just for the selected members of ALAP who signed up in time. That's a reminder to all of you. If you don't belong to ALAP, you didn't get that benefit. Luis Alfaro, who's a internationally known playwright based right here in LA, Chicano performance artist, winner of the MacArthur so-called Genius Grant, will be speaking at, I believe,
11:30.
11:30. Thank you, Lee. So you're going to want to tune in early for that. And he is going to grace us with a whole hour. So you are going to be very lucky if you get into that. Again, if you don't get in through the registration link, you can get in through Facebook. Look for the Alliance of Los Angeles Playwrights on Facebook, or look for our YouTube channel and check some of the many communications with which we have bombarded you. Later tomorrow, there is a reading of 6 plays by the winning playwrights who entered the Play Competition Festival. There are 6 10-minute plays. I'm sure you'll enjoy them. And just so you know, we at ALAP don't judge our members' works. We go outside to independent judges. And finally, this will be followed by a bring your own booze virtual cocktail party that starts at 5. You can come and introduce yourself. Maybe some of our speakers will join us. We'd love to have you. And then we can personally express our thanks again. Thank you all so much for joining us. If you have questions about ALAP, I encourage you to go to our website, laplaywrights.org. That's playwrights spelled the old-fashioned way, like a wheelwright, WRIGHTS at the end after playwrights. And I forgot to mention, there's a panel on marketing tomorrow with superb, professional, dedicated PR specialists and producers of theater. That panel is at 1:30 p.m. and it includes Raquel Lerman of Theater Planners, very well-known firm here in Los Angeles, Shimon Wood, and Javi Moreno. Please forgive me for omitting that. So super full day tomorrow. Public events are Luis Alfaro, followed by the panel on marketing, followed by the play reading of 6 short plays, followed by the cocktail party. And after that, I get to go and lie down in a hole. Except I'm having a reading of my own of some 20 pages, which I haven't finished writing, but I will. So
I always
thank
love
you
that
all.
Stephen Adley Gurgis says when he's going to start to write a play, the first thing he does is he calls everyone he knows and says, I've got a reading. It's 6 months from now. It's at the so-and-so theater. You got to come. Please do come. And then after he called about 20 people, he goes, oh, crap, I better write the play.
Mona, Felix is asking a question about can people contact Lisa and Leon with follow-up questions?
I will leave that up to our panelists. They are so incredibly busy. I want our audience to understand that if they decline, please understand these people are working constantly.
Felix has already got my email, so sure, Felix, we're in touch. Yeah, for Felix, for sure.
My email is lisasoland@gmail.com, lisasoland@gmail.com. And I would love to hear from you. And I am currently editing a Christmas anthology. So it's a collection of short stories and poems. It's going to be awesome, but I'm in the crux. It's going to be loaded into the internet next week. So if you email me now, I can get back to you. And I don't like typing because I do it all day. I'd rather just, give me your phone number, write your question, and I'll call you. That's what Charles Nelson Riley used to do. He used to call us out of the blue and go, Lisa. No. So I'll call you and I'll just tell you, I'll leave it on the answer on your machine. So that it'd be fine for you to contact me because I'm almost done with the huge project. Thanks.
Well, thank you both very much. And I can assure you who are listening, you people, you are so lucky. And this is so amazing. It's
our pleasure.
Thank you. From the bottom of my heart.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Leon. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Mona. Thank you, audience. Fellow writers.
Thank you.
Doing what you love.
So much. It was really great. I have to go, and terrific. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, and thank you to our wonderful speakers, Lisa Soland and Leon Martell.